Thank you. I start by thanking you, Toby, and to Corporate Knights for organizing the Earth Index and for inviting us to kick it off on this. What for us here, I'll acknowledge my territory. I'm the traditional territory of the Wasanich Nation of the Coast Salish peoples. I'm here within my constituency of Saanich Gulf Islands, where the sun is going to get stronger. It was just rising as we started here. So Haishka Sam, it's an honor to be with you all. I don't know if I provide context. I know I have memory, and memory leads to deep outrage, leaves me trembling with rage a lot of the time. I want to take you back to the last week of June 1988. And yes, it's so wonderful to see Ralph Torrey again. There were another key Canadian who played a big role is Dr. Jim Bruce, who was one of Canada's lead scientists. Love to Jim and Ruth if there anyone on this anywhere on this call. The last week of June 1988 was a heat wave in Toronto. And it was a strong enough heat wave that one of Canada's most eminent scientists, for the first time ever, identified the heat wave as caused by human burning of fossil fuels. That scientist was Dr. Ken Hare. He was at that time already a companion to the Order of Canada. For those of you who know what that means, I mean, he was beyond respectable, eminent, and it caused some waves because in those days nobody thought we had a debate about the science around climate change. The only question was, how bad will it get before we stop it, and has it already started? So we knew, and that, of course, that date in June was coming up to 34-year anniversary of writing these words, which is the opening sentence of the consensus statement that the scientists issued that day at the conclusion of the conference, which was, quote, "Humanity is conducting an unintended, uncontrolled, globally pervasive experiment whose ultimate consequences could be second only to global nuclear war." Don't say we weren't warned. In roughly 4 years later, in June of 1992, you referenced the Rio Earth Summit and Severn's extraordinary speech. At that gathering, every leader of every nation on Earth signed the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Since that time, speaking of gaps, the nations of this planet, human civilization, and our economies have emitted more greenhouse gases than between the beginning of the Industrial Revolution and 1992, when we had enough science and promised to reduce our emissions before they could become dangerous. Dangerous, in quotes, is the word used in the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, that we must arrest anthropogenic greenhouse gases before they become dangerous. I really apologize, Toby, for raising my eyebrows when you said 2 degrees might be okay, or 1.8, because I'm scared to death. We're at 1.1 degrees Celsius now. And if you happen to have been anywhere near the heat dome in British Columbia this summer, 1.1 degrees Celsius doesn't feel like a nice, safe place to live, not when 600 people died in 4 days because of a heat dome just in this one province, or the wildfires just in this one province, or the subsequent floods that destroyed every land route to the lower mainland of this province and cost lives. My husband and I have friends, young couple, been farming 7 acres of land. They've been farming to have a beautiful, sustainable, regenerative agriculture. When I say they lost their farm, the land their farm was on was mostly carved out and fell into the river. These are not fun times at 1.1 degrees Celsius. And we increasingly know that we're unlikely to hold to 1.5, which is, as Prime Minister Mia Mottley explained for low-lying island states, or for her nation, Barbados, 2 degrees, she said, is a death sentence for us. So here we are in Canada with the worst record of any G7 nation. We are at, the last statistics were from 2019. Now we have new data from 2020, which shows, largely due to COVID, that our emissions dropped for the first time in ages. But we were warned, even in those numbers from the government, expect them to bounce back. And why not? Our plan, released by the government on March 29th, calls for an increase in fossil fuel production in Canada of 21%. And that's before we approved Beta Nor. On April 4th, the IPCC made it really clear in the third working group report to the sixth assessment to say, look, it's now or never. The lead author said, quote, it's now or never. Well, given that our government approved Beta Nor 48 hours later, I guess they've opted for never because it's either now or never. We don't have the luxury of time anymore. And our government's commitment to net zero by 2050 is an abandonment of 1.5 degrees because net zero by 2050, as you indicated in your opening remarks, Toby, is not adequate to hold to 1.5, not without what the IPCC has now given us 3 years to peak emissions no later than by 2025 and bring them in half by 2030. Canada is not on track to do that at all. So for me, it's not getting our government to keep its promises. It's getting our government to find its moral compass. When Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, says out loud, expanding fossil fuels is economic and moral madness. And then we get a budget April 7th that says we're going to finish the Trans Mountain Pipeline. We're going to figure out how to transfer its ownership to Indigenous peoples. And the night before the budget, we're going to approve Beta Nor for 1 billion barrels more fossil fuels to put on the furnace for our children's future. So I open with memory. I close with rage. I am a member of parliament in a room where I speak respectfully and lovingly to all my colleagues. But I just wonder if for the last 34 years, I've been way too nice.